Today I want to make a defense for the much decried and slandered Dungeons and Dragons 3.0. So this is one of those editions that people seem to really hate on, and I'm going to explain why I think it's unfair that people hate on this edition of D&D this much. I'm going to give you some reasons why I think it's actually a really great edition of D&D, and I think I'll give you some reasons why I think you might like to pick it up as well as something to add to the collection. So just for a bit of background, this edition of D&D came out in the year 2000. It was after Wizards of the Coast had acquired TSR. So, prior to that, Dungeons and Dragons had been owned and published by TSR, and this was the previous edition of D&D. And late in the cycle, there was a different cover, but which I do have, but I just haven't grabbed it for today's video. But this is a second edition player's handbook. So, this came out, it was quite a departure from second edition for a number of reasons. One of the main differences, I suppose, was that you now had ascending armor class, which means that you roll a d20 and you're trying to get a high number, and that's been the case throughout D&D's history, but the difference here was that the target number that you're trying to hit is pretty much given to you. So it might the number that you're trying to hit will be spelled out, and it will be like an armor class 15 and you're trying to hit a 15, whereas in the past they used to hit armor class 0 or THAC0, and it was quite, a lot of people find it quite tricky because you're actually doing some kind of subtraction, and you can use charts, and it was a bit complicated. So for a lot of people, they really appreciated that as an innovation. They introduced things called, they explicitly had skills and feats in this, which was kind of a departure. They did have non-weapon proficiencies in second edition, which are kind of like skills. So there were some very key differences. And then in terms of the art direction as well, it was for the time, probably is a bit dated now, but it was quite modern. The art was quite modern. I mean, it looks very 2000s now, but when it came out, it was pretty. I thought it was pretty incredible. And I remember seeing this. I'd already started playing D&D kind of, but I remember seeing this at the shop, and I mean, some friends decided to put our money together and buy all three. So these are actually the original copies that I played with during high school with my friends. And if you're sort of saying that this is a terrible edition of D&D, look how much wear this has. This is granted it has been in storage a bit and kind of banged around a little bit, but I mean, that is a pretty well used, well loved copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide. We play this all the time, and this isn't even the book that you would refer to the most. You probably would be referring to the Monster Manual, and again, this is one of our originals that we played with in high school, and it's really it's like it had some decent wear, but it's all honest. It hasn't been sort of abused, and it's still in pretty good shape. So, what are my reasons for sort of suggesting that this is actually better than people make it out to be? Well, the first one is it's very indicative of a transition from, what many might consider kind of an old school D&D vibe or style into a newer, more modern approach. So it really sits between those two things. It sits between what turns into, 4th and 5th edition, or even 3.5, and it sits between, kind of those earlier editions that have the, that kind of old school vibe. So I actually think this, as written, has a bit of an old school vibe to it. It has lower HD for certain classes, like the Bard and the Rogue, so that the HD sort of matches up more with what you'll find here. It's just a bit more lethal. And as an approach and feel, I just think it's a bit more similar to kind of an old school way of playing, but then it has those sort of modern what we would call kind of modern conveniences of ascending armor class and sort of some quality of life things to make it better. The second thing is that these are dirt cheap. You can pick these up kind of anywhere, and they are like really, usually people are almost trying to give them away. I can only sort of talk in New Zealand, but like I've seen them sort of for $15 a piece, $20 a piece. If that's converted into USD, I don't know off the top of my head, but you know, maybe like $40 or something, $30 to $40 for a set. You could possibly get these for, depending on how much people want to move it. So that's, if nothing else, and you're just curious, that could be a good reason to pick this up. People often would way rather pay money for a 3.5 player's handbook. And I get it, like the rules were updated between these two. So this comes out in 2000, and then in 2003, the 3.5 edition comes out. I remember at the time being pretty sort of annoyed by that, because we had put money into these, and then Wizards of the Coast did an update, and I thought we kind of almost had to buy it. so I think I had a 3.5 book, and then we still had some 3.0 books, and we actually played we played for years using both of these. So which I'll get to in a second, but yeah, so it's cheaper than the 3.5. It's not going to put you out of pocket too much, and if nothing else, out of curiosity, you could pick it up. The other thing is it plays pretty well at low levels. Like if you're creating, a first level character, a fighter, it's not too crazy. It's what you would expect if you're used to sort of an old school thing. You got a D10 for, if you're playing like earlier editions than the second edition, that would be, I think OE had a D8 hit die. I can't remember, but anyway, pretty standard for 2E stuff. The skill system is a bit more clunky, but a bit more involved, but not too hard. And then you're really just picking a feat or two depending on what class and race you're playing. It is a bit of there is some complexity to it, but at that kind of low level, it actually plays really well. I thought I was kind of imagining it, because I've got all these really good memories playing 3.0 core. We played through a lot of the official adventures, and I thought, is this just me? Like, because you read how much hate is online for this, and I looked at, I was just going through various forums, and people are saying how crap it is, and in my mind, I was like, this is, it was a really fun addition. So, kind of last year, I think I ran a short campaign using just 3.0, and I also allowed, some of the 3.0, I guess you'd call them supplements or splat books, and it was really fun. To me, there aren't any real issues at low levels. It plays pretty well, and it plays decently at high levels. It does get a bit out of hand if it's, a lot of multi-classing and there's a bit of complexity with the stat block and stuff like that, but that's no different than 3.5. I'd argue that 3.5 is actually, or Pathfinder especially, is even more unwieldy at those high levels of play, because it just, the complexity of rules is actually higher. There's more rules, and just to me this is more inviting of hand waving, whereas I think once you get into sort of Pathfinder and to an extent sort of 3.5 with all of the huge range of supplements, it gets quite unmanageable. But this, not too bad for that era of system. There are some exceptions to this. So I think if we were thinking about I wonder if this is all, I can't remember if this is all alphabetized. Let's see if we can find, heal, okay. Harm. So this spell is pretty broken. It's a necromancy spell. It's a cleric level 6 spell or a druid level 7th spell. And it's one action for casting time. It's touch range, and it's instantaneous. There's no saving throw. There is spell resistance, however, but harm charges a subject with negative energy that causes the loss of all but 1d4 hit points. If used on an undead creature, harm acts like heal. So yeah, okay, that's pretty broken. I remember in a campaign that that I was running, back in the day, this was, harm or heal was pretty pretty intense. And then the companion to this is heal. So kind of similar, but the opposite. So yeah, in the campaign I was running, that in particular caused a lot of problems. One of the characters, I think it was an undead character, or maybe it wasn't even an undead monster. It was just a regular one, and they did harm on it, and it's reduced to 1d4 hit points, and I think the wizard killed it after that or something. So stuff like that was clearly a bit silly, but the beauty of D&D is that you can house rule things, and if there are spells like that, yeah, okay, it's not great, but just change the rule a little bit. The other thing that I think is good about 3.5, just core, is if you are just playing it with splat books, like, it's pretty limited. Like the stuff here, if you're wanting to play a barbarian, druid, or ranger, the stuff here is not going to break the game. Like it's just really kind of subtle kits. I might be kind of misremembering it a little bit, but to me it's pretty reasonable. It's not, in fact, most of the time I'd almost say you're better going with sort of core choices, and that these have a level of being almost purposefully balanced a little bit too far the other way. You're doing a lot of this stuff not necessarily because it's powerful. You're doing it just because it's enjoyable, and it's flavorful, and and again, because there's such a limit of these core 3.0 supplements, it feels like a very contained and very the parameters are very clear. Whereas if you get into sort of 3.5, there's just so many supplements, there's just so many options, and sometimes that's amazing. Like, that's exactly what you want. You want to have a ton of options, you want to create some real crazy out there character, and you want the rules to facilitate that. But the older I get and the less free time I have, the more I like that kind of limited, and you could just play with these 3 books if you wanted to, and again, I think you could have a very rich campaign simply with these 3 books. The other thing too that I sort of touched on before is that there's quite a high level of compatibility between these two. There are lists, and it does seem like a lot of difference, but as I said, we played these 2 books simultaneously in the same campaign with, when I was a teenager, no issues. We'd probably defer to this if there was a rule that had been updated, and ideally you would be working out of this book, but there's quite a strong level of compatibility, and that really does carry over into adventures. If you're using a 3.5 adventure, even Pathfinder 1E, you could run without too much issue using this. I would even dare say that you could probably go backwards too, and look at some of the 2E or even 1E stuff and kind of approximate it. You'd have to strip down how you run, monsters and stuff, but I don't think it would be, an insane challenge to convert that. I think if we're looking at where this edition came from, it came really from 2E, and specifically that kind of late 90s where they were really experimenting with stuff. This supplement, and there's a few others in this series, players' options, skills and powers. Let's see if we can see what the other one, if it lists the other ones here. I don't know that it does. There were a few others in this series, and really what they were starting to get to the point of is looking at how 2E was constructed or thought of, and changing that, and really sort of redefining that, giving different ways to roll up characters, doing sort of like point generation, looking at backgrounds, this is, a lot of this is kind of standard stuff, but they added things like willpower and they added sort of like sub abilities and stuff. And so TSR at the time was really playing around with a lot of the game design around D&D, and I think as it came into 3rd edition, there was a genuine appetite to try new things or different things. A lot of people, as I said, really welcomed some of the changes that 3rd edition brought, like that ascending armor class. At the time, I really thought it was cool that you can use skills and feats. That's a little bit clunky and sort of having, sort of experienced other ways of doing things, but specifically maybe like 5th edition or even just sort of house rules where we've changed things a bit and made it a bit more reasonable. Like, in this, you could have rogues who had just insane amounts of pluses to stuff. And as a DM, you either go, well, I just allow everything to work and this rogue to open kind of everything, or I, make some house rules. So there were things about it that were a little bit odd and definitely kind of on the sort of broken or just overpowered kind of side. But again, you can house rule this. You don't have to play it by the book, and there's so much resource out there if you do want to tweak, and even just from from the fun of it, just kind of creating house rules and stuff. So this is kind of a quicker video, but I just think this is a very maligned edition of D&D, and I just kind of wanted to provide a bit of a counter argument to this. It's not my favorite edition of D&D, but I do have a soft spot for it, and I think it's actually better than a lot of people make it out to be. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments on this one. I feel like it could potentially be a bit of a provocative video. People might really disagree, and you might have some really good reasons, so I'd love to hear them. But yeah, as it stands, I'm a fan. Cool. See you later.